Okay, cool. Yeah, as you can see, this is all of us that work there. And some more little things about us. So this presentation, I also haven't publicly spoke since I did theater in high school, so bear with me if I'm a little.
You're doing great.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna first just kind of do an overview of what the market is and why local produce is important to us. And then at the end, I'll go into how to become a vendor and what we need from you and all that kind of fun stuff.
You can point to this way, probably. If it's not doing it.
This thing is fun. Oh, there we go. Fancy slide saying what the presentation is.
I not work with the screen share, so I will be a clicker.
Okay, cool. So the first screen is just like kind of a who are we? Blue Market is in Spenard. It's been open for about 5 years. It's a local refillery that is based on local products and getting people to bring in their own containers and fill them up. So it's mainly based in like reducing plastic and supporting local infrastructure for a whole lot of reasons, which I'll get into later. But yeah, super committed to local or reducing waste. And we have a super strong unit of a customer base. So I'm mainly like, I do a lot of the local produce buying, but I'm also the front of house manager. So a lot of my job is getting to see who comes in on the day-to-day, and it's a lot of people who are super passionate about local produce and reducing waste. And that is something super sweet to see in the everyday, because it gives me a bit of hope. And something I think to say here too is that there, like, a lot of this is about like the growing side of things and starting things up. But on the other end of that, there are people that want to support that and are super into buying local and knowing where their food is from. So I think those pieces meet together are super nice. And my hope in this is to sort of end me being the local produce buyer is to give you guys some support and resources that being that middle person from buying it to the consumer. So yeah. So yeah, core values. Jen and Jess are the owners, and I think something super sweet about them is that when they started the market, they had a very set idea of what they wanted to do and what they wanted to be. And so this is just sort of laying it out in a bunch of words, giving back to giving back to the community, being transparent, and being sustainable. Because in running any business, there's a lot of ways that you can avoid, but they're very sort of upfront about that and really earnestly trying. I can bet that every single day they earnestly try to avoid all the ways that they can and support that they can. So that's something that warms my heart about all being here. But yeah, next slide is good. So Jen kind of mocked this up right around the time that Blue Market opened. It's cool 5 years later, it's still something we reference from when we vet new vendors for joining into the Blue Market catalog. Now, there's 6 things. It's local shipping, packaging, community-minded, eco-friendly, and humanitarian. In a perfect world, every single company would be able to hit every single one of these things. But a lot of times, it's just not possible. But I think for out-of-state companies, like for things like deodorant, as an example, we're a little bit more of a tight ship on them following all these things or getting as close to it as they possibly can. But local is really our big thing. If we can find it somewhere local, that's what we want to do. And a lot of the times, you can work with local people. Like for an example, City Greens. I just started talking to Nick, the owner, because he sells a lot of like spring mix and basil and a bunch of different herbs in like the clamshell packages in the grocery stores. And like a couple weeks ago, I reached out to him just like a cold email. And I was like, hello, would you ever be interested in selling it to us bulk and like me bringing you containers and you filling them up? And he was like, absolutely. I've always wanted to do that. So like just in the past couple weeks, I've been able to try and mingle with a local hydroponic grower. So a lot of the time too, having the strong core values in mind, it allows a foundation for you to be able to reach out to people with those. And a lot of times people will meet you in the middle. I think we all kind of don't want plastic in our lives and want to eat good local fresh food. So that's something really fun. So, yeah. This is Jess. You can click a couple times. There's like little things on there. Yeah. Jess is one of the owners. Here she is all cute with some little baby chicks. So this is some interesting statistics to me. 95% of our food in Alaska comes from out of state, which is crazy because Alaska is so far up from the rest of the states. It has to travel quite a ways to get here. And grocery stores are responsible for a lot of the waste in the United States, about 1/3, a little under that. So I feel in my job position very responsible and accountable for all of those things and reducing them. So Alaska Grown, I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with this logo. I'll get into it a little bit later. And then SNAP, we accept SNAP, which is awesome because having a bunch of our food be local allows sort of a gateway for families that can't afford sometimes to buy local food because it can be a little bit more expensive to buy it there. And this quote in the middle, the average food item on the US grocery shelf has traveled farther than those families go on their annual vacations. It's wild to me. That is from a book I read, Animal Vegetable Miracle by Barbara Kingsolver, where she is a great author. You guys can have heard her. But for a year, she basically only ate things local around her that were grown around her for a year to see if she could do it. Because of how much, and she talked a lot about how much petroleum is in our food, not based on like how it's grown, but how far it has to travel to get on our plate. And eliminating that too and nurturing local relationships with farmers is important to me for that reason. Just sort of eliminating the travel time. And something with travel time too is, produce it's a plant. So a lot of times when you travel it so far, it isn't, especially like leafy greens and stuff, it can't sustain that. So a lot of it starts to go bad by the time it gets here, and it's a lot of spoilage. So that's something to note too. You can go to the next slide. There'll be quite a few foods. So these are a few of the Blue Market's food waste reduction tactics, because a lot of times it's like grocery store, you have food, it goes into the trash. So we try to extend a few more things out before it gets to that point. So for us, it's usually sell at full price, discount it. And if it's sad, we'll try to put it into some of our baked goods. Like we do focaccia. We use a lot of sad produce on top of our focaccia. Or we'll do like chimichurri or carrot cake cookies with sad carrots. And just all sorts of things. Alyssa is our baker and she's very creative. So that's super fun. So we'll go and then baked goods, and then we have like a free food shelf in the front of our store that we'll put sad food, and then sometimes it'll go to staff too, just depending on its state, and then it'll get composted. So it's sort of trying this whole mindfulness of not just creating more and more waste with food. Because I think Blue Market, when you go Blue Market, you know it is like sustainable in plastic and like reducing a lot of plastic, but we're pretty mindful about food waste and what that looks like. What else do we have on? Oh yeah, Best Buy dates. Super weird in America. You got like Best Buy, Sell By, and Use By, which all mean different things. And a lot of people don't know what they mean. Sell By is kind of messed up because the food isn't actually bad. It's just when you should sell it by, because then the consumer will have enough time to consume it. So we try to educate a lot about that. And then, like I said, we also donate our food and our bread to food banks as well. Yeah, next slide. Oh, yeah, look at that. It's got missed. But yeah, plastic waste and food packaging is also super huge, which is like why I try to do things with city farms where just trying to get their food in, not in the plastic, because it's not burning plastic. You know, there can be a divide bridge, I feel like. Yeah, another thing with out of state is that a lot of their produce comes in like these big plastic boxes. They're like produce boxes and they're not recyclable, not compostable, it's just like this big thing of plastic. And it's like to keep the moisture in the produce, but it's just waste. Or waxy cardboard boxes, which are also not recyclable. So that's something cool about local farmers too, is that a lot of the times they'll just show up with what they're like totes of stuff. And then I'll pick out what I want and then they take back their tote. And it's just the food, which is super awesome. So then this, now we're sort of getting more into the vendor part of things. I know you've held strong through my talking. So why are we committed to all things local? There's many, many reasons, but something that warms my heart personally is being able to have someone ask a question and then just being able to ask the farmer. I think before I started working at Blue Market and living in the lower 48, I'm from Georgia originally, I used to just go to the grocery store and buy my apples or buy my kale. And I was just like, this is an apple, this is kale. But I never think about where it came from or who grew it or if it was in the state or any of that stuff. Just never crossed my mind. Come along way. Now it crosses my mind a lot. So that's something super cool too, is that pretty much everything we sell produce wise, I can link to a person, which is just, I think especially in this day and age, it's nice to have things like that. It's very grounding. It's just like, yeah, it makes my heart feel good. And like there's hope. Yeah, I know it's not great to see people read off slides, but yeah, need a refresher every now and again. Yeah, so something also to note is that there are local wholesale distributors here. So people that will buy farmers' produce and then distribute it to retailers. But when they do that, it does make it kind of easier because they can sell it in big quantities and not have to worry about it. But they get a bigger price cut because if you're selling your 12 count of onions to one of the wholesale distributors, then you have to sell for a lower price because the wholesaler is then going to have to mark it up to make more money off of it, and we'll have to mark it up rather than just selling directly to the retailer. So that's something to note too that I've sort of just noticed in my time of buying produce. These are some fun little stats from 2025, just like as a picture of how much of local things we've sold. It's a lot of big numbers, so I'm not going to read them off to you. But yeah, 140,000 ounces of local produce in dry foods, 23,000 Alaska eggs. It's a lot of eggs. I can just picture how many, like the eggs, how they would fill this room. So this is kind of like a picture of that we do buy a lot of local stuff, and this is also what has sold. Like these are sales stats. So this is what people want to buy and are interested in buying. So just kind of give context that there is a market for it and people like it a lot. And then this is like a very partial list of some of our Alaska vendors. 68% of our vendors are Alaskan. I think it's 43% of our products as a whole in Blue Market are Alaskan. So I'm sure you guys see some familiar names on here. Yeah, so just a few friendly names. And then this is something fun too. The golden carrot Alaska grown. Is anyone familiar with the $5 challenge? Show of hands. Mm-hmm. Okay, a couple. So Alaska grown is something that they do a $5 challenge, where it's basically if every family spent $5 a week on Alaska grown produce, it would generate billions of dollars into our economy. So it's great, that's huge. Like to me, $5 a week is not that much. So every year they do something. I'm sure you've seen their shirts and stuff, like the Alaska grown. I saw them when I first moved here a couple of years ago, like Reds or something, and I was like, oh, it's just for people that grew up here. No, it's something bigger. I figured it out, but it did take me working at a grocery store. So the golden carrots, as you can see, it's like this big, beautiful carrot. It's like almost the size of a person's torso. And they give this out every year to the retailer that they feel like, what's that word, sort of like broadcasted and showcased the Alaska Grown Challenge, and like advertised for it and educated about it. So we won it a few years ago. The Northern Lights, Fred Myers, I think, won it this last year, which is funny because that's where I saw those Alaska Grown shirts the first time when I moved here. So I'm like, yeah, you got it across to me. I just didn't know it was. Yeah, that's Alyssa. That's our baker who puts all the sound produce ingredients into our scones or whatever at the moment we are trying to shove it into. And she's really talented, so people buy it and they don't even know it's that. Yeah. So now it's more of the vendor section of the thing, which is what we're all interested in. So what local foods do we sell? Lots of things. I think most people are here for like produce. So all types of produce. The one thing to note though is, especially with more small farms, quantities aren't super big. So it happens often where we get from a lot of backyard farmers that some guy will come in with his tomatoes and I'll buy his tomatoes and then we're set for tomatoes for the next week or so. So that's something to note, is that sometimes someone will snatch up the tomato market and blue market sooner than the other person. So we're not always like across the board available to buy everything just because of turnover as a grocery store. But yeah, I love having a bunch of different things. I love having a variation. Last year we had like these huge stocks of Brussels sprouts come like October, November, and I loved them so much because it was just very unique to me. I really see those big stocky Brussels sprouts in a grocery store often. So I am all for different types of produce and whatever you have to grow. I think that's great. So eggs and dairy, love local eggs. One thing to note with eggs, if you're interested in selling your eggs, you can sell your eggs to a local retailer. But there's like a bunch of different rules for it, which I have like more extensive on the next slide. But something to note is that if you're just going to be able to sell us like, and this is chicken eggs, if you're selling like duck eggs or goose eggs, or we'll take just a few and loose, and those will sell. But for chicken eggs, if you have like, I would say under 100, then they need to be cartoned up and packaged, because we have another loose egg seller that brings us like 100 of loose eggs, and honestly, they're just kind of harder to keep track of which chicken eggs are whose chicken eggs, unless they're packaged. So if it's just like 36 eggs or something, like a couple dozen, I would just recommend getting some cardboard cartons and then labeling them with all the information you need. Something, if you're interested in doing that, you could use cartons from other businesses, but I would be careful about labeling because they're kind of strict about that. You don't want it to where your label's just on top of another company's label. Then if your label falls off, then it's the other company's label and it's like false advertising. And the people above don't get too happy about that. So yeah, but I love eggs.
Yeah. So, do you have like the capacity to sell a lot more local eggs? I feel like sometimes I come in and you don't have any.
Yeah, we do. It's always like kind of an uphill battle of trying to get enough eggs in, because Alaska, the state it is, how chickens feel here, is kind of finicky because it gets colder. Chickens don't like the cold. And then, so really it's just like not having enough supply or will have supply and then something will happen with their chickens or running a farm. A lot of things can go wrong with running a farm. So if you have something like your water line froze, it's like, we're not gonna get eggs in. So it's kind of like, honestly, it's often just a chain of events. I feel like what happens most with our egg producers as to why we don't have eggs in is like, there's like a prime point in a chicken's life where they just love laying eggs. But then there's like, when they're young, they don't lay that many eggs. And then when they're older, they don't lay as many eggs. So at least from my experience working with vendors is sometimes they'll get new chicks and then there's just a weird off period where their new chicks haven't started to lay as much and their other chicks are older.
What's your wholesale price, or what do you pay a farmer for eggs?
Really depends. Off the top of my head, I want to say for a carton of eggs, it's like $6, $6 or $7. So we'll mark it up, I think, really depending on the market, but usually we'll sell our eggs from like anywhere from $9 to $11, just depending on what the market looks like. So a lot of things like that, we buy them for a good bit of money and then we don't have much of a profit margin with them. But that's just me trying to recall off of the purchase orders that are like snapshotted in my head. But yeah, if you do have eggs, you would be interested. And then we also sell meats and fish. And then the rules just changed for like cottage foods and cottage foods being able to be sold in retail stores. We're trialing it out with Common Root. She is like the first and only one that we've had, because it's just been the last couple months where it was like, and I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to delve into this too much, but from my understanding, Alaska as a whole had it to where cottage foods could be sold in retail stores, and Anchorage was like, no. And then in the last couple of months, they've been like, okay, maybe. With the right signage, it has to be like on a separate shelf and with proper signage and a few other things. And pH can vary with different things, and like tomato sauces, I think might be something different. So if you're interested in like having your cottage food sold in a retail store, I would strongly encourage to do your own research and then come to us once you've done your own research. And I am not the one that deals with that stuff. Jess is one of the owners, and she's very good with words and verbiage, so I trust her a lot more with that stuff. And then we're also looking at how things are packaged, just as a reminder. So glass, metal, compostable containers rather than something that's plastic or non-biodegradable. It's going to be way more up our alley than something that isn't plastic. So these are kind of the long-winded, just a section of the egg guidelines for what you need to sell your eggs. And this is all on like the Division of Environmental Health, Alaska website. You can just look up like selling eggs, Alaska. It'll pop up. But it's just a few things. So you need to like clean and store your eggs. They need to be kept below 45 degrees, and then they need to be labeled in a very specific way. As you can see, they must use a font size that's at least 1/4 inch tall. So, yeah, so just something to look into if you're interested in selling your eggs. There are some guidelines and some things you need for your labeling that I would look into before selling them. Let me leave if you are interested in selling any of the things I've listed to Boomer. So wholesale pricing, that's something we use just because we have to mark it up to the retailers. A lot of wholesale pricing, the reason for it is to cover overhead costs and then to also sort of get a cushion in for spoilage. Because when food is sitting like at a farmer's market, it's nice because you just bring it and then you sell it and then it goes home with the person. But when we buy it, usually sits until it sells or until it's turned into something like gotcha toppings or what have you. So that is something to note. Minimum markup is 20%. And when we are saying wholesale, it's like under what you would sell it for. So we don't want to sell it for something that's way over your cost or way over what someone would pay for tomatoes, because it's just not feasible at that point for someone to be like, why are these tomatoes so expensive. It's like, I'm sorry, we're trying. So yeah, minimum markup is 20%, ideally 40% gives us just a little bit more room to play in for things. And then what you have available to sell. So I usually like a little just itemized list, and that can be like a phone call, text, and email. So what you have to sell, and then if you're selling it in pounds, and how many pounds you have available, and then if you're selling it per each, how much you have. That helps me get a bigger picture of how much I can buy and things like that. So in person is more than welcome, but the market is small show, type show. So if we want to do it in person, I would just like give us a call first, because then you can make sure that one of the people that can buy produce is at the market. And it's only a couple of us that do it. So I'll just give a little ring first, and then you can also text us or just give a phone call and tell us what you have on this phone, and we can tell you if we're interested. A lot of people, I feel like email is the main source, and that's on the last slide. And then I also have a couple business cards if anyone is interested in getting that information. And then method of like delivery, like if you are able to deliver it or if it needs to be picked up. Like I said earlier, the market is kind of a tight ship. So it is hard for us to pick things up on a routine schedule. It can sometimes be worked in, but delivery is honestly the easiest thing for us. And then just this last one is just kind of a note that I was talking about earlier as like how, because things have to sit for a little bit before they sell at the market. When I'm buying produce and looking through the produce, I'm looking at how old it is. So if it's like, keep going back to tomatoes, but if it's a tomato and it has like mushy spots, or it just seems like a little bit wrinkly, so it's like starting to get a little bit dehydrated, like it was picked a while ago, or if it just looks overall sad, sometimes I'm not gonna go for that stuff because it's just not gonna retain well for the customer or look good for the customer. I feel like it's like people, I like weird looking produce and odd looking produce, but aesthetics, I've noticed people like things that look nice. And, you know, they're like, oh, I'm gonna take that home with me, you know, whereas something that's a little bit sadder, you're just not gonna go for it unless it's true. So, yeah, no mold either. And sometimes with produce, especially if, like things that we're still buying this time of year, like beets, carrots, and potatoes. And, I would just like rifle through your box first, because sometimes they start, you know, cooking together and there's like mold or like that. And it's like on the bottom of the box and it's unnoticeable because it's had it sitting for a long time. And then things with like leafy tops, I like them a lot, like the carrots and beets, but because they have those leafy sprigs at the top, they seem to dehydrate faster. So at the bottom, like the beets and carrots on the bottom tend to go a little bit squishier faster. So I don't usually buy as many as those. I'll still buy a couple, but I don't buy as many because they just don't turn over fast enough for the squishiness not to happen. So carrots and beets with the tops cut off, typically sell faster, which is sad because I love beet, like carrots, and I love beet greens. And but if any of that stuff happens, we make like carrot top, chimichurri. So we have some things under our belt for dealing with that. And then this is just sort of our email, our address, our phone number, and then this will all also be on the last slide, which is about to happen. And then delivery in reusable containers is fabulous. We do vendor like container returns with a lot of our local vendors, where we'll just give them a container and they bring it back with their stuff and then they we give them one. You're good to go to the next slide.
He's QR coding. Okay, you got that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And then these are just some more fun pictures of our staff, Rebecca and Swish, happy Swish chart, local Swish chart. Yeah, and then the next one is the last one. And this just has the vendor questionnaire QR code, which is just like, if you're interested in becoming a vendor, it just like says a bunch of questions for you, like what your company is, what you're about, things like that, and then all of our numbers and stuff. Yeah, does anyone have any questions from us? Any questions? Cool. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.